So let's go over how you would do these. For the first one, we need to get A by itself. So we need to get rid of that -2, get rid of that -4. B, and I'm gonna go with the easiest ways to do this. I'm gonna go with the easiest way to do these. There could be other ways as well. For this one, we could get rid of 4 by adding it to the other side. But remember that these are not like terms. So if you got any of these wrong, just like last quiz, fix it on yours, get another sheet of paper, write it down. That way you don't make these similar mistakes on the test tomorrow. So because they are not like terms, we would just put them next to one another, b plus 4. And then we need to divide both sides by -2. So if I divide this side, the -2 goes away. And then I'm going to switch this a little bit so that the A is over here, but it's going to be the same thing. Z plus 4 all over -2. Many of you had that answer, and that's fine. Normally, when we see problems in general, you won't usually see the negative in the denominator. I let that go for this, and we'll let it go for the test. What they would usually do is take that negative and kind of distribute it throughout, or multiply everything by that negative. So if you did that, you would have ended up with every sign changing. So A equals -Z minus 4 all over +2 would have been an acceptable answer as well. You could have also taken the -2, kind of separated the fraction. So I'll do it from here. So instead of having this entire fraction separated, since I can divide 4 and 2, that would look like C over -2 plus 4 over -2. The only way to simplify that is if you separate the fraction. You can't simplify it while it's still together. So that would give you A equals -Z over 2 minus 2. Either of those answers would have been acceptable. Questions on that one? The second one is basically the same as this first one, except the variable is different and is a different number. However, for this one, we're adding 3, so instead of adding 4 or adding it, we would subtract it. Again, these are not like terms, so we wouldn't be combining them. And we would still divide out that -2. So this, or if you distributed up the negative, either of those would have been fine. In this case, separating the fraction wouldn't really help you simplify it because 3 isn't divisible by 2.
Okay.
On that one. Carter, do you have questions on this? It might benefit the whole class, is why I was asking. For this one, we needed to get x by itself. X is by c. So the only thing we needed to do here is to get rid of c. And since c is positive, subtracting c to the other side would have done that. If we subtract c, the only thing left on this side is x. And then we can just bring c to the end. If you put this in alphabetic order, that would have been fine too. But either of those work. For 10, 10 was similar, but there were a couple different ways you could have gone about this. One, let's say we took the same approach, get rid of c by subtracting. If we do that, we're now left with negative x though. Which means now we need to get rid of that negative by dividing everything by negative 1. This is really a negative 1. I'm going to divide each of these by a negative 1. Remember that there are like invisible ones in front of all of these. So when I'm dividing, I'm really changing the signs. Negative, negative, that becomes positive. Positive, negative, that becomes negative. Positive, negative, that becomes negative. Negative, negative, that becomes positive. The other way you could have done this is you could have gotten rid of that negative first by moving x to the other side. Now you're left with c equals d plus r plus x. But if you do that, you now need to get rid of the d and the r by moving them to the other side by subtracting. So you could do that both at the same time or one at a time, either or. Even though these are in different orders, I see that the signs are still the same. So D is positive, D is negative, R is negative. Either way, you could have done that. Do you have any questions on that one? For 11, there was only one thing you needed to do. C was next to A. Remember, anytime things are next to one another, they're multiplying. So to get rid of C, divide both sides by C. So you're just left with A. And that would have been your final answer. A equals D minus R over C. And for the last one, you needed to get A by itself, and M is near A. So to get rid of it, add M to the other side. Or if you want to put it in alphabetic order, you can do that. Questions on either of those? So your 1.2 test is tomorrow. It'll work just like the 1.1. I do want to mention that you have probably seen your 1.1 test grades. They are done. I'm just waiting on a couple people to finish taking the test before distributing them. I also wanted to mention how we're going to do retakes. So this will be on Canvas, just in case you forget. But first, if you've had a science class that does benchmarks or a previous math class that does benchmarks quarter test, it's kind of going to be like that, but not at the same time. So what I mean by that is you will have a chance to retest. It won't be like this week. It'll be towards the end of the quarter. That benchmark or quarter test won't be everything, like all of the objectives, unless you need or want to retake everything. So that's where it's different, because usually the quarter test is, okay, we've taken unit 1 test, unit 2 test, and now the quarter test is a retest of all of that. The benchmark will just be what you need to retake. So if you don't need to retake anything at that time, you won't need to. But if you want to retake everything, then that will be retaking. Between now and then, you will need to come before or after school so we can go through your tests. You're going to do test corrections, so fixing everything you did wrong. I'll get a copy of that and I'll explain that to you when you come individually. You may or may not need additional practice done, and that's case by case depending on your score. And then after all of that is done, then later when we do the benchmark, you'll be able to take that benchmark. Anyone have questions about that process? If you haven't realized already, quizzes get replaced by tests. The benchmark will obviously replace test grades. I do not go back to, so if you do better on the retest than the test, it's just going to replace the test. I'm not going to replace your quiz grades as well, again. Questions on any of that? For the remainder of class, if you still have that review sheet from last week, you can work through the solving literal equations part, get extra practice. You could pull out your literal equations notes, do that additional practice. If you have not done your Khan Academy that was due Friday, you could work on that for additional practice, or the Delta Math that was due way back when. Any of that you can work on for additional practice. If you have questions, I'll be around. If you need extra help, or if I wrote on your quiz, come see me for extra help, please sign up for my office hours today. After school, come meet with me so we can go through step by step, one-on-one, get that extra help before your test tomorrow, or tomorrow morning before your test. But you now have this time to work.